we all kind of chuckled. We all kind of chuckled and sort of said, oh, ha, 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 Ken and Joanna think it's not going to be a good year. And let's just say that was the fire that night and then COVID, and that was the year 2020. But this year, because we want to make sure that we get something positive out of it, because I have a feeling, I know what you're going to be sharing with me and the group, we're going to talk about love. So the first part is about what are your thoughts from the people you've spoken to about the year of the tiger and the water tiger, and what your thoughts are about that. And the second half will be about compatibility and thinking about partnerships and thinking about love. And that's because we're thinking about Valentine's Day this month. So first, Joanna, Ken, better or worse?
Well, I think there's a great irony that we're doing this on February 2nd because the Groundhog Day spirit that's here, yes, in many ways, it's the same thing over again. We thought last year, we'll just do a one-off hybrid, Zoom talk here. And and now we're doing it again. The Zoom talk has now been the tradition. And so it's going to be interesting. And that's one of the things that the advantage, again, you have the almanac, you have, is it good for, is it bad for? We don't have our people in the room, but we have well over 200 people here, which we would never be able to fit in MOCA. So, it's a trade-off. And sometimes you can't look back. Sometimes you have to not necessarily go back to where you were, but to take it forward. And that's kind of where we're coming in with the almanac.
So for those of you who actually already have our almanacs and had been collecting our almanacs, you probably will know that we started with MOCA in 2010. And it means that last year, we actually finished a 12-year cycle. And this year is the beginning of the tiger again, because we started with the tiger, which was when MOCA, soon after MOCA moved to Center Street. And so for us, this is actually kind of a special moment, because we never thought, did we? We never thought that we would actually finish an entire cycle.
We never thought that we would do a second one, actually. That was the amazing thing, because this came out of maybe one or too many drinks when we were talking about what we were going to do. How are we going to brand MOCA or send a message that for what this means to reference history, reference culture, but yet make it new and take it in a different direction. And we thought, well, let's just take, I happen to have one right here, the actual
big book
almanac, take the big red book.
And look at how thick it is. It is pretty thick. Oh.
Take the big red book and turn it into a little red book of our own. And basically what this originally was just a shot down cover art of the Hong Kong edition. And it was at every table at the gala. And for the launch, that initial period, the next year, we got a call from MOCA saying, well, where's our little book? And we're like, well, what book? I mean, that was just a one-off project. Oh, no. We sold more than we gave away at the gala. So we actually, in a couple of weeks' time, managed to make our own little edition. And that's what we stuck with for the last 12 years.
So the whole point of this book is that there are these readings, and the readings has to do with good and bad regarding activities every day. And I think there are lots and lots of you who already know the story, is that this is very, very ancient, as in the geomancers, the people who look at the sun, moon, stars and calculate all these movements, sun, moon, star, earth, and everything else, all the elements, to actually figure out weather. And these are what we call, very glorified type of weather predictions, to tell us exactly, whether it's going to be cold, whether it's going to be warm, whether there might be, huge storms.
Well, actually, and it goes well beyond that. I mean, this was originally done for the emperor. This was the emperor's calendar, if you will. And it starts with a very simple breaking of the year, dividing into days, months, however you want to divide that. Sometimes, half months, moons, following the moon. But this was the same raw data that everyone has. I mean, it's the way our calendar is broken up. They just use different dividing lines. But along with that came what this means, and it would register the heavenly bodies with the earthly bodies, and what would what activities would keep things in line with the universe. Now, you come down to at bottom, as Joanna said, they are glorified weather predictions with the metaphysics attached. So if it's a good day for a wedding, if it's a good day for planting, it's going to be sunny. I mean, that is ultimately what it says. But also there is a certain element involved, because you don't want everyone, partying at a wedding when they should be out planting. So there's a different register of how that works. Conversely, if you have a day that says, repair your fishing nets, well, it means, you're not going to be out on the boat because it's probably raining. And so there's a lot of that time where the almanac tells you how to retrench and not necessarily be out there front and foremost, but sort of stay back and take care and build your structure and take care of all your stuff at home. I think in a way we've kind of had 2 years now of staying home and repairing our fishing nets. So it's time to sort of move beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that can be done on Zoom, and I think you'd be amazed. I mean, there is actually a lot of, think of it this way. Last year, our geomancer, Warwick Wong, already told us, well, you can say that you're stuck at home, but don't you think that you're actually sleeping more? Don't you think that you are actually sometimes taking better care of your own health, simply because there is sort of less running around? So I guess in many ways, as you can imagine, the most important Chinese philosophy, which is the yin and the yang, there is always the good, always the bad. So it's a matter of actually seizing the opportunities, really knowing where the opportunity is. And yes, including in love. Thank you, Nancy. I knew you were going to ask that. Yes, the idea of being able to not necessarily roll with the punches, but the idea of just going with the flow. And I think there's something about, indeed, this year is the water tiger that we actually should, pay attention to. The idea of water, which is one of the 5 elements.
And I think this is a sophisticated group, because I can already feel the sort of pressure, like, tell it, what are you not telling us? Just cut right to the chase. We can handle it.
About the year, about
Yes.
couples. Okay, well, first of all, one thing that you really have to keep in mind about this is that, and our geomancer hammers this all the time when he talks to us. But it is something that is very clear in terms of its roots in agrarian culture. It's not a period when people just check their watch and check their daily situation. They looked at the sun. They thought about time in terms of days and weeks, not necessarily minutes and seconds. And so you run into a situation where it's not necessarily, is this a good day or a bad day, but what are the coming weeks looking like? What are the patterns that we have to look at? And you can see, and like weather, for example, it's a snowy day, but is it a storm front coming? How long will this take? How cold will it be? For how long? All of these things play into this. And so when we had 2 years ago, actually what our geomancer said, Nancy, that night was, find a safe place and hide, which meant that it was going to take a long time until something came up. And he couldn't even tell what it was. I said, is it a man-made event, or is it a natural disaster? And he said, I can't tell. It's just everything in the universe, everything will be affected geographically, just all around the world. And so, and he could not at that point predict an ending because it was just too far out. So that was 2 years ago. Last year, he looked at it and saw that there were changes.
There were improvements.
Yes,
You remember that, when we have the vaccine, this is known as a seriously good improvement.
So it wasn't utter chaos, but it wasn't back to what we would think of as normal or consistent. And so we'll get to this year's readings in a second.
Okay, should we now get into this year's reading? Are people prepared? Maybe you have.
Wait a second. Time out. Let's give them a few seconds, because
Okay.
I know what you're going to say. All right. So it is happy hour. So feel free, if you need something, go get it. We'll give you 3, 2. Okay. Now, Joanna, tell us.
Okay. So our wonderful geomancer Warwick And this is important. And then those of you who have the book and you can refer to it, and those of you who don't, take some notes. So we have Lunar New Year, very important day. Yesterday, February 1st, was the beginning of the year of the tiger. But if you look at the book, you will realize that there is another very important day, which actually is also going to come up. And that's actually part of the reason why Ken and I chose today, February 2nd, to give this talk with Nancy. Because according to geomancy, according to fortune telling, the way to look at the beginning of the year is not the day of the beginning of Lunar New Year. It is actually the day that marks the coming of spring. And the coming of spring is this Friday. And that's actually kind of interesting, because you will suddenly realize that, guess who picked the coming of spring as a very important day? Opening of the Winter Olympics. Think again, that's what's happening. Okay, but let's go back to the to spring comes, which is February 4th. That is the day that marks the upcoming year. And so what Warwick did was he went and actually did the fortune telling of that exact moment that marked the coming of spring. And actually took a fortune telling of that moment.
So the same type of approach that you would take your birthday and see what the year offers for you as a person, he did for that day.
Which actually then marks the entire year. And Nancy, you're absolutely right. We have very sophisticated audiences here, so I think they will understand that this is a pretty high level of reading the almanac. Okay, so unfortunately, it is not very good. But I always feel that it is important for us to know in advance, whatever it is, knowledge, being armed with that knowledge is better than not being armed with that knowledge. And I remember some of our friends who attended the January 23rd, 2020 talk wrote to me on email and said that they actually heeded our advice, immediately found a place, and actually was very safe in 2020 and through the pandemic. So again, it is important that we know what is coming rather than not. So I'm now going to read. There is a shroud of murder in the air. Lots of unexpected phenomena. There might be evil foreboding because the configuration is actually what they call the 7 killing. I am sorry, I did not make this up. Somebody else made it. Well, Warwick actually sent it to us.
Yes.
However, what he says is this, is that what we should do, because it means that there are people, or what he calls the petty people, who are, what shall I call it? Not the proactive people, the pessimistic people. Okay?
Also the people, in Confucian terms, the people who are out for themselves, really, and not for the betterment of society.
So these are the people who might have a slight upper hand this year. However, what we always should learn, and this has to also to do with the water element of this year, is that there is going to be a lot of quick flowing of events, quick flowing of influences, quick flowing of matters and events, okay? And so what we must do is be constantly aware and learn to adapt, and adapt very quickly. Because if you adapt very quickly, believe me, you seize the chance, you win. Because you always have to remember that every year you can say it's good, it's bad, but you know what? Certain people do very, very well during years when other people don't. So really, really try and seize those opportunities when you see them. And also another thing that he reminds us is be gentle to the world and be good to people. Because being kind-hearted and being generous also means a lot, because that actually creates for you a lot of rewards, whether you call it up in heaven or in the future. It's like literally storing the goodwill, and that goodwill will actually be your protection for the year. So yes, that's in general, the prediction. Yes, Nancy, don't please,
I
please
think
don't
people are
curse me.
people are still on seventh killing. So can you break that down a little bit?
The seventh killing is actually a configuration. And the configuration actually is a way of saying that there's a lot of, the air of murder. And you can imagine that the air of murder has to do with the people who are not really necessarily in the right place, but trying to get there. So it's the idea of people who are standing on the side and ready to usurp power. Any countries in the world, think of the elections, think of what is going on now. I think there is quite a bit of that around already. It's kind of pretty evident that we are in a place where there is a lot of injustice, and the injustice, hey, we can still stand up against it. Nobody's stopping us from standing up against it.
And the other part that I think we might want to connect the dots, since we've been doing this, especially via Zoom for the third year in a row, is when you went back to work last year, and especially this year, given that it's continued on, was there any processing of the earlier, because he didn't know what it was going to be in 2020, and then it ended up being the same thing. Did he say that makes sense? Can you help us understand those conversations
yes.
when you look back?
When we look back, we just said, thank you. How did you know that we were supposed to hide? And he said, he read the stars, and the stars said something about going to hide in the year 2020, which was the year of the rat. Okay. And he also, it's funny because in life, there is the short-term, mid-term, long-term, and very, very long-term. And so he explained another element, and that is important for us to understand. And this principle is that also there is the very long term, which is what he calls the 20-year cycle. So every 20 years, there's a shift, and then another 20 years, another shift. Okay, when we think about the Chinese zodiac, we have 12 animals. And then we have the 5 elements, which means that when we actually make everything, just make sure that there is an entire cycle, it's already a 60-year cycle. And so a 60-year cycle can still be divided up into these broader 20-20-20-year cycles. Okay. And so he's saying that another thing we should note is that the next new cycle actually will only start in 2024. So we are now at a tail end of a 2 decades of whatever you call it. Okay, we're now at the year 19 and soon to enter year 20 of that huge cycle. So there are lots of things that I guess is going to be ending, and then there will be things that will be starting. And the overriding element of the 20-year cycle that we still are currently in, which is at the end of it, is the earth element. And what is the earth element? Think of the boom in real estate. Think of what is related to the earth, as in literally, I mean, earth as in the, as in the elements, of the ground. Okay, so this is the building, the real estate, all of that. And what is happening there? Has been happening in the past 18, 20 years. I mean, this is actually a very, very big overriding long-term cycle. Okay, now we go into the midterm. Okay, the midterm is that we are in year 3 of this cycle, and we now have, for example, the water tiger. Now, the water element is actually black, as in dark. And so that's another reason why that this year, which in Chinese we call it Liu Nian, okay, a year that actually flows. And flow is actually not necessarily good because things move so fast. However, remember, if you actually manage to grab your opportunities fast, you win.
So, yeah, Ken.
Well, this is a much better reading, and this is something, as you were saying, that over time and with reflection, it comes in, because when you start just looking at the animals in the zodiac, you look at the year of the rat, and the rat being, of course, the initiation of the 12-year cycle. And there is this overriding belief in the Chinese zodiac that in the Chinese New Year, that the new year will represent the rest of your year. So everything has to be as good as you can make it on the first day, because the rest of the year will follow. Well, you add that and multiply it times 12. The first year of the entire lunar cycle will the first day of that first year will represent the next 12 years. So when we saw 2 years ago, what had happened just basically overnight, and things snowballing downward, there was that overriding thinking, oh my God, we have 11 more years of this. We're never going to get away.
No, the lucky part is, as you know, there are all these overlapping and different cycles.
But now
so now you understand that, because this is so sophisticated. I'm learning. Well, thank you, Warwick, because I'm learning so much, because there are these cycles and they overlap. So for example, the wood, the earth element, okay? So the earth element, being the overriding element, will actually basically recede by 2024. So we will then enter a new era. And I have to say, I kind of very much look forward to that. And I did ask, and I just want to tell everybody, and since it's already appeared in print, so this is no special secret of any sort, is that I asked specifically Warwick what's going to happen with the pandemic, which I thought everybody, clearly this has to be on everybody's mind.
Pretty obvious question, yeah.
And the interesting thing is, Warwick actually said it's going to be ebb and flow. It's going to be coming up and down. So we should just be prepared. And things are not going to be very easy until later in the year. So let's just project into the third quarter, fourth quarter, okay? But hey, we are doing well. We are standing. We're alive right here. And I think we should be thankful. And I think being thankful, and he says being thankful, is important, because there is a lot we can do still under the whatever circumstances, whatever limitations we might have.
Well, not only ebb and flow, but the peaks and the troughs are coming at a much faster pace than they ever have in our lifetime. So it is that is an advantage in the downturn, because you realize.
Okay, so but Ken, everyone, at least I'm thinking this. I don't know if others are thinking this. We're all exhausted from the stagnation of the world, the local, the everything, and everyone's just enough. Every aspect of the great resignation, the great sabbatical, whatever you want to call the chaos that we live in, death, mourning, lack of processing those things, and closure, and whatever that means. But I think it's a good time because I'm getting some questions and comments around like, what, we have to wait till 2024, but Lisa, we're gonna create some happiness here. So let's segue to love, because how bad could love be in this scenario? So what we want to know is, people are fearful. This sophisticated crowd knows that when it's the year of the tiger and you're a tiger, it's not your year. In fact, you need to be more cautious. So our audience is aware of that. So you should wear red underwear, do what you can to counter the cautions. Don't step on cracks, whatever you want to do. Don't, go down black diamond moguls or whatever. But let's talk about compatibility. So some people say the tigers and the monkeys, it's not going to be a good year. You two supposedly are not supposed to get along because you're on the opposite ends of the zodiac system. My mother is a horse, I'm a rat. And we always say it's not the mother-daughter fiction, it's because she's a horse and I'm a rat. But explain to us about love. Tell us the general scenario for love, and also how we should think about a companion, someone who's not going to drive us crazy if we're still indoors 24/7 for until 2024.
I think maybe Ken Smith will tell you how he has survived up till now.
Well, we find
sourdough mix.
We find our metaphors wherever we can. I mean, my favorite one was Amy Tan's, where she was a fire dragon and her mother was a water dragon, and together they made fog. That was just a beautiful way of bringing that about, because they were in many ways so similar and yet not. And so, you find a very complicated situation there where, I think the older you go through, the more years you put into this, you find what is the core of your essence, the core of your being, that doesn't necessarily have to do with where you grow up or when you grew up. Things that you inherit from your family lineage, culturally or in terms of values. And all of those things really, really play in. And sometimes it takes a long time to find what those are. And so sometimes, I will, sometimes say things that things will come out of my mouth, and I look around for my father thinking, well, it must have come from him. He must have said that somewhere in the background.
Okay, let's just get back to the project here.
Yes.
Okay, I think it's important to say, okay, when we say, oh, there are not just 12 types of people in the world. Okay, so when you say that whatever animal sign you are, it's not that. You have the animal sign, you have the elements, so such as the Amy Tan and her mother, one fire, one water. But another thing is that these are only still 2 elements. Actually, when we were born, we were each born with actually 8 characters. 8, not necessarily elements, but 8 attributes that actually are what make up what we are. And of course, that depends on the hour you were born, the day you were born, whatever the stars, the sun and the moon, and then also your tiger, and then this and that, whatever. Okay. So therefore, it's 8 characters. And I have to tell you, real fortune tellers, such as Warwick and many other people in that profession, they make a lot of money because what they do is they actually match the 8 characters of the 2 prospective married couple. I mean, the people that are supposed to get together. And that actually is interesting, because then you would say that these 8 characters is actually what you were born with. But I have to now say that, there is nature, there is nurture. I think that in a lot of the Chinese beliefs in romance is that, romance will grow if you actually learn to respect and to respect the other person. And I think that is very important. And of course, those of you who are single, it is absolutely very important. Have fresh flowers at your home right now. Have lots and lots of red everything around you. Have gold coins. And I just want to show you my latest beautiful gold coins Ken and I have been collecting. This is a 50-cent euro chocolate coin. And I love this. This is a 200 euro bill, as in a chocolate rectangular shape.
Which is the highest level of chocolate currency we've ever found.
We love that. But the thing is that have all these things around you, because these are all things that attract and project also good luck. And the other thing is that there is the Chinese Lantern Festival, which is also known as the Chinese Valentine's Day. You have that opportunity. And this year, the Chinese Valentine's Day will fall on, oh, guess what? February 15th, which means that you can actually have 2 dates. You can have the Valentine's Day date, and then you have the Chinese Valentine's Day date. Great, double. Anything else we should say?
Well, how did you deal with your supposed incompatibility?
Well, it did help that we lived on separate continents for a while.
We were
Tell us more.
Well,
we were a long distance couple for a number of years.
Yeah, and I was in New York at that point most of the time, and she was in Hong Kong most of the time, and I would visit there, and she would come back here, and that continued for probably 2 years.
Quite a number of years, yes.
At least 2 years.
We forget we've been married too long, but it's okay.
And how do you think, there's a good question here related, this is from Kenneth Lashins, thank you. Because of Wuxing, how does the I Ching play into the reading of the Chinese Almanac, if at all?
Absolutely. The I Ching is actually a very important part, because that actually was the beginning of how they actually tell fortune. And remember, the I Ching has to do with all the different graphs, okay? All the different signs and the diagrams that you end up with, okay? But however, the way that the geomancers work, they literally are looking at astrological phenomenon, okay, all sorts of astrological phenomena. So when does the moon, the waxing and the waning of the moon, I mean, this is something that is not just in any way Chinese or even Asian. I mean, it is literally global. And on that note, maybe we want to just slightly segue to reminding people that, these days, you can say that you're being politically correct, but actually, no, we're just acknowledging properly that the Lunar New Year is actually a global phenomenon. It's not just the Chinese and the Chinese diaspora, it's the Vietnamese, it's the Koreans. And actually way back, the Japanese also celebrated Lunar New Year. They still do now, except the thing is, I love it. It's during the Meiji Restoration in the mid-19th century that the Emperor Meiji decided that they're going to be westernized. So therefore, New Year is January 1st, as in the solar calendar. But regardless, the whole idea is that the beginning of spring, the coming of spring, the end of a cold winter, all of that is part and parcel of so many cultures. And the idea of family and community and being together, that is also so important in making the world what it is now, that we still have the happiness and the warmth despite the pandemic. Because, for example, I Zoomed my parents who are way back in Hong Kong for the Lunar New Year. I can't see them as in real person, but it doesn't stop us from Zooming them.
Well, you can view them, exactly. So there is that level of connection.
So I think those are really good components of some of the things. Can you remind the audience, like if you are a tiger or if you're a monkey and the year doesn't sound like it's going to be great, what are some of the counter actions you can take to protect yourself?
Okay. There are many ways of doing it. There was one year that it was not a very good year for me, and the geomancer actually gave me a medallion to wear. It has to be close to my heart. And if it's close to my heart, it's going to be fine. And I have to say, I survived that year very well. There were a number of years, and that's also interesting, is that, people have temper. People get angry. When people get angry, they lose something, okay? And when they lose something, that is actually when you're not in control. And being in control and being able to sort of take things as they come. And that's why these days, I have to say, another pandemic activity that I've taken on is every day I meditate. Meditation has actually made all of us, I think, just a little bit calmer. And so being able to have a clear head and just not blow up, not get angry, that is already one way of protecting yourself. Be wary of that, because people who just throw a fit, they are actually in many ways expending the good karma that they had. They sort of threw it out. Okay, so I hope that these are good little points to remember. And yes, sometimes people would say, your name or whatever this year, you should be wearing something that actually has a wood element to it. So then somebody would actually have something that is a pendant that has wood. Now, this unfortunately really has to do with individuals, and it's not as if it's just somebody born in the year of the monkey or the tiger. It really has to do with much more pinpoint type of understanding exactly, the 8 characters when you were born. And that, I have to say, you might have to consult a professional geomancer. Ken and I are in many ways translator and sort of cultural translators for something like this. And that's why every single year, and we have to thank our geomancer Warwick, he actually was trained as an architect. He was actually behind the building of quite a number of subway stations in Hong Kong. But he's retired now, but his grandfather was a geomancer. So actually he was very much, from a lineage, from a family that actually, did delve into all this wonderful ancient wisdoms.
Yeah, and I have to take this point to brag about Ken and Joanna. They're very modest in their declaration that they're somewhat of a cultural translator. Ken has been reviewing arts productions for most of his career as a journalist for FT and other publications. And Joanna has been an arts producer, and they both collectively worked on projects with David Henry Huang and any sort of Asian American production team or Asian production team. Ken and Joanna have been their cultural translators and making sure they're accessible to both local audiences as well as also broader audiences. So a big question with regarding the elements and the zodiac sign. I think that confuses a lot of people, especially the golden dragon, but that was the earth dragon. It gets all mixed up. And then there's the water element. So can you remind everyone what the elements are? And then also the water, is the water tiger, how different would it be if it's a regular tiger, and what should we be mindful of?
Okay, 5 elements. 5 elements. There is metal, there is water, there is wood, there is earth, and there is fire. I think this is pretty straightforward. So there are the 5 elements. And so the 5 elements rotate, and then you have the 12 animals rotate. And that's why with all that rotation, the full entire cycle of, basically people for a long time would say the full cycle of a lifetime was 60 years. And that's always interesting. Now people live until 100. We have a very dear friend in England. Her father turns 100 this month, okay? But a long, long time ago, people considered 60 years was already a full life. And when you turn 61, you basically are going back to when you were 1 year old.
And you just start the cycle again.
Okay, so I hope that helps. Now, regarding the 5 elements, as you can imagine, they do mean very, very different things, okay? You have 5 elements such as, the water, as we are now saying, the water, tiger. I mean, you can just have just imagine the element of the water and what it means to the tiger, okay? Which, of course, is very different from a fire tiger, because there would be a lot more of that type of, quick movement that actually blares up.
And emotional
goes down.
Emotional
There's a very different idea of, where things move, as in also of the 5 elements, some would actually be the one that sort of can overpower the other. Just think, if there's water and fire, what happens? Water can extinguish fire, okay? So that's the whole interrelationship of the elements. And then you actually match it with the 12 animals. I always remember the best one is that we always have this great laugh, is that always look for the year that is the fire chicken, the fire rooster, because in Chinese, it means turkey.
I think to give our audience a flavor of what a day looks like, would you mind reading today's and then reading tomorrow's? I think that'll help.
Well, today.
And of course, hey, Nancy, you should actually, what do you call it? Promote, they can buy the book from MOCA.
Oh, we've been doing it on the chat, and people have been buying. So thank you so much. Did you notice the price is $18.88?
It's all very good luck. Very, very good luck.
We're trying to counter things. So go ahead, Ken.
Today is good for rituals. It's good for receiving money.
Ooh.
Actually, any day is good for receiving money. But anyway, pest control, hunting. It's bad for renovating kitchens or building stoves.
Okay.
Wait a second. See, I want to challenge that, because receiving money, you said, oh, every day is good for receiving money, but not necessarily, not if it's a bribe. No, not if it's a bribe. And then you get in trouble for it.
No. There are always ways to interpret this, particularly now, because when people read this, it's certainly often the context changes from what it was 1,000 years ago. So
okay, so that's what it's good for. What's it bad for?
It is bad for renovating kitchens and building stoves.
Today is not good for renovating kitchens. I actually have, I think my friend Lisa actually wrote to me already, said, today I am not renovating my kitchen. It's very important.
And building stoves is a very interesting thing, because that was a very loaded term originally. Now, we in the back of our book, we deconstruct a few of these terms and about what it really means. But to build a stove, if you were in a multi-generational household, building your own stove meant, this is my space, Dad, stay away. Mom, this is where we live. And so the reading of this would be that today's not the day to do that.
This might be a day that you should not be doing, for example, setting up your own company that is a branch company. Okay?
Got it. So you're interpreting it.
No, it's very, The building stove, all these terms, you can say that some of them are actually very simple. For example, farming. planting, but even planting can have so many different meanings. Think, okay, in the good old agrarian world, planting is you go into the field, you put down the seeds, right? But wait, nowadays, how many things can we put seeds on? I mean, and also not only that, the idea is that we are creative people. Where is the creative seed? And what do we do with a creative seed? So the idea of planting can actually take on wonderful metaphysical meanings.
So you have a whole range of things like that, that after a while, it really doesn't matter what the root of this was. Is tomorrow really a bad day for hairdressing? Or what does that mean? Now, originally, that's another case in point. This was originally what the baby's first hairdressing was going to be.
First cut of the hair of a baby, which you can imagine is such an important beginning. Okay.
Now, that's not the way women in Hong Kong interpret that today, however. So that's a whole different level. But you run into all sorts of things here that whether it really aligns with the universe or not, sometimes that doesn't matter. It is, does it align with you? And can you focus your energy and say, well, to use a dramatic example, Tuesday is a good day to go to court. Okay, I'm devoting all of my mental energy to say to focus on that, because it's going to be a full out concentration and all of my resources will be needed on that day. So I'm not going to worry about it over the weekend, or I'm going to focus on it, but it's not going to happen right now. I have an end date in mind. And so in a way that really harnesses energy in the same way that Joanna was talking about meditating, in the same way that you deal with all of these things, that really whatever it takes to get rid of distraction and to focus and keep yourself, on track, on par, that is, ultimately what it's about.
So much of Chinese culture and Chineseness has to do with elements, when we think about feng shui, or we think about the almanac and the weather patterns, and all of this has to do with it, where it seems like, and there's a wonderful question from an audience member who is adopted, and how one would find out what their A traits are if they're not that familiar with, Chinese culture or Chineseness, but then also expanding that question in terms of not only getting information. Then also someone said, does Warwick does personal consultations? But then just more broadly,
yeah,
is this only relevant for people who are of Chinese ancestry? I mean, this is right, or so how does this go more broadly?
Well,
Elton John?
Well, yeah.
Sorry, did I say Elton John?
Yeah.
Well, if Elton John is doing this, then we all got to, okay.
Well, we were informed that Elton's tour of China was based on the dates from the almanac. He didn't necessarily know that, but his manager said that he would approve if he knew that. But it was done, by people in the back office. But ultimately, you reach this point where we're all, as we said before, we're all looking at the same sun, moon, and stars. We're all looking at the same bits of, do we start school? Do we start a relationship? Do we build a house? Do we move out of our parents' place? All of those things are pretty universal. The way you express it, that's where culture comes in. And so to understand, where the universality and also the differences, and to respect it and to be amused by it, and to basically understand that we're just all on, different pages of the same book. Basically that is the way that we have been very much, inspired by.
Yeah, and someone said, how do you connect all of this to astrology or Nostradamus or Kabbalah? That's kind of interesting.
Right. I mean, it comes from a period when there was no separation. Keep in mind, Isaac Newton, the man, the man who we look at as the father of Western science, or science, spent most of his life trying to turn lead into gold. So I mean, where does that balance between astronomy, astrology, magic,
the current
mysticism.
The current day equivalent is playing Powerball and Mega Millions.
No, and also maybe having the summoning the whatever creative energy or the right focus, so that you actually you score really well on Wordle.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But it's not necessarily does the letter of this reflect. I mean, yes, you have a Chinese diaspora around the world where you will find this same, edition of the almanac. No, I mean not ours. I mean the actual almanac. You will find that.
Right side up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right side up.
The almanac.
Yes, thank you.
Classic mistake. I'll look at it next time. But you have the same people looking at the same book around the world, whether they're in a Chinatown in Amsterdam or San Francisco or Sydney, and but that is just one expression of what that's about. And to come into it from a non-linguistic standpoint, to look at the idea of where it comes from, the roots of what it means, and what it stands for, it has a lot of power there culturally. That really, that part of it is something that we can really take a lot of inspiration from.
See, this is Richard Young's catching you in a loophole. He said, but hey, if we read the day, January 28th, and then it's like, is that for Beijing time? Is that for Changsha time? Is it for New York time? What is it for?
Yes,
well,
we had a whole discussion with Warwick about that. And then he said, wherever the sun is. And so the sun moved. Isn't that wonderful? Wherever the sun is. I also love it. It's so poetic. It's like, poetic and cryptic at the same time, wherever the sun is. But he indeed calculated everything according to Beijing time. But that was his sun in Beijing or in Hong Kong time or whatever you call it. I mean, that whole East Asian time that we know. But actually another very important part, and I think Ken will tell you, because there was once a Q&A in which Warwick said, what time? What hour? What are you talking about? You want
well, it goes back to what we were saying before. Someone said, is it a good day or a bad day? And he said, well, for what? Because there's always there are the red words and the black words. It's good and bad, and it's always good and bad for something. This came from a time when people did look at the sun. They didn't look at their watch.
As in the sundial. Remember the good old sundial from a long time ago?
There was no standardized time.
There was no iPhone.
And so that's a situation here. We run into situations with solstice and equinox and things in here where they will vary. And sometimes there is a little slippage in the universe, shall we say.
Welcome to International Dateline. This is
when the solstice will actually fall on a different day, thanks to the 24-hour clock in Asia or here.
Yeah.
And so and so that's one of those things that the a geomancer will look at that as, we have to recalibrating, and things will play into and often actually it turns out to be the resonance of that turns out to be a little detrimental. So you really do have to be prepared for that. This was the situation, back in with the imperial times when the courts geomancers were there. If they missed an earthquake or a really horrible situation or a lunar eclipse, the emperor pretty much was done for.
Oh, no, not only that, the geomancers would lose their heads.
Well, yes, but also that would be the mandate of heaven. The ruler had lost the mandate of heaven.
Joanna, why are you smiling?
Well,
it's Chinese New Year. Always smile. I'm gonna now show you my favorite, a hongbao, very modern. It means 笑口常开, which is, you always have a smiling, happy face.
That's when you were like, when you said seventh killing, you're also smiling. And I think all of us had trepidation. But I have two more questions and then I want to wrap up the tomorrow's forecast. But we talked a little bit about grabbing opportunities. And obviously a lot of time people think about economic opportunities, business opportunities. And I kind of referenced the fact that people are on the great resignation or whatever they're calling it now, the great sabbatical. And we're all sort of burnt out from everything, even though staying at home seems easier, but it's all very much a toll on your mental health. So how would you succinctly talk about the economy or our work life? Have you any insight on that from Warwick? And then I need you to remind us what Warwick said, because some people came on a little bit late and they just want to hear that scary forecast that everyone is referring to. And then we want to hear about tomorrow so we can all prepare properly.
Okay, so 2022 will be a year marked with many obstacles clogging the flow, because despite having the water tiger, it is the black water tiger. I'm sorry that I think it's important that we just know what is happening, okay? We should be prepared for danger in times of safety. And the second one is accumulate grains in case of famine, which means that we should be saving up money. So people who are spendthrifts, please just remember, saving money is a very good thing. Find ways of saving money, okay? And then one should always be wary of sudden turn of events, and especially these sudden turn of events will take place in the summer and the fall. I hope this is useful, and I think it is good. And we have to thank Warwick, who is very generous in sharing his wisdom, because, hey, it's real wisdom. And if I may repeat again, the first thing that he talked to me about regarding the Year of the Tiger is that there is a shroud of murder in the air and lots of unexpected phenomena and possibly evil foreboding because of the predominance of the 7 killing configuration. Okay, enough of that.
Wait, it's scarier the second time, just for the record.
Well, she didn't smile that time, which was
You see, I should have smiled.
Okay, now what do we do for tomorrow?
Okay, so tomorrow, it is a good day for rituals, good day for repairing walls, fixing holes, cleaning house. Now you probably should have been cleaning house on New Year's Eve, yeah, but given some of the parties, yeah, maybe you need to clean house again. It is bad for hairdressing, weddings, or tailoring. So don't do any of those. Spring comes, that's going to be another very big day.
Friday is the big day. Friday is spring comes. And so this is good because this is like, you know, your backup day to actually have more of the rituals of New Year.
And to itemize those, it's good for rituals, good for asking for blessing, starting studies, meeting friends, hairdressing, again, starting a business, good for transactions, and building stoves, going back to building stoves. So that's the day you break off and start something new. It's bad for buying farmland, buying property, or fortune telling.
Okay, people in real estate, do nothing on Friday.
Just knock off at noon, really.
And yes, we can ship out the almanac. So thanks everyone for dialing in. And you know, Joanna, Lee, and Ken Smith, I would not be able to hear your messages from Warwick and others. I would not be able to hear those messages from anyone else but the two of you, because you cushion it in a way that I can absorb it. And as a reminder to those who may have got on the call last, as many of you are aware, MOCA had a 5-alarm fire in its collection space, which has created a great deal of work for us in the last 2 years, but also many silver linings. But I was with Ken and Joanna that night when there was a fire, and they had just told us it was going to be a terrible year. And I pride myself on not being too superstitious, but at the same time, after that day, I have been wildly cautious, and that was a rat year, and I'm a rat, and all of that was very painful. Give us one beautiful thing that's going to happen. And one question, because other people might be wondering, are we looking at the butt of a red pig on your shelf?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I think welcome to Ken Smith. This is a beautiful red pig that we got for the Year of the Pig that when we were in Thailand. And in Thailand, we actually gave a talk on the almanac. It was very cool. Yeah.
Everyone, I just want to make sure that we're not all supposed to get a red pig and look at the butt all day, because that's what I was thinking.
No, that was inauspicious. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't do it. This guy did.
Okay.
We love the pig.
So tell us something we should do on Lantern Festival Day on the 15th, because now we can plan for it. Should we invite someone out for dinner? Should we do something fun? Tell us what's okay to do and what something to look forward to.
I think because of COVID times, going out is good, but maybe not so good. Pick somebody you like, pick friends you like, have a small gathering at home, make food. Not only that, make dumplings, because that is the way of saying that you have the full cycle of the celebration of the Lunar New Year, because it has to do with from the beginning, which is, February 1st, until the first full moon. So it has to be romantic in that way. Enjoy the first full moon with people that you like, you love, and not all, but cook food. I know that not everybody is a good cook or wants to cook, but hey, that is a very important, essential skill for both men and women. Okay.
This is a perfect segue because our next program for the MOCA Fest is with Chris Chung, the chef and restaurant owner. And he just came out with a book called Damn Good Dumplings. And our MOCA's very own curator, Herb Tan, will be engaging with Chris, and you'll learn how to make those damn good dumplings. So come out for that, make it a virtual date, and you can look on the MOCA website of mocanyc.org for the exact details of that event. And then we have a slew of other events, especially for young people. There's so many arts and crafts and really fun book readings, and also some other things about more US-China relations and what's happening in this very tense period between the US and China. But thank you so much, Neil Gibbs, who is the master of all programming and everything else at MOCA, and to Joanna Lee and Ken Smith. You are our local Warwick.
Well, we're translators, that's all.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have our ear to the ground.
Yeah. And to everyone, be safe, and thank you so much for joining us. And most of all, 新年快乐, 恭喜发财, and happy Lunar New Year, and water tiger, and be careful out there. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.